What do you do when you find out your wife is cheating? Get angry. Get even. Retreat into your shell and blot the world out? I don't know, probably a bit of all three. The key to keeping your sanity is to get the balance right. The trouble is, I don't think anyone knows what the right balance is. I didn't when I first suspected that Christine, my wife of 10 years, was cheating. There were little things that didn't add up, and over time, I got more suspicious. I suppose these suspicions simmered for about 3 months before they came to a head one night when she was laid in. I knew she was going out after work, but had expected her home around 9 p.m. It was about 10:30 when she arrived home. I asked her what she had been doing, and she said she had been out with her friends Samantha and Linda. Trouble was, Linda had rung me at about 8:30 and asked me to talk her through a problem on her computer. There was obviously a breakdown in communication somewhere, but in my experience, liars always get caught. Now, I had been utterly faithful to Christine over the years. Don't get me wrong, I would still look at and appreciate an attractive woman, but I never once moved beyond window shopping, even though I had a few offers over the years. Christine was 33, 4 years younger than me, an attractive woman with a flawless complexion that some girls are blessed with. She dressed well, kept a tidy house, and was a good cook. She was fun in bed and was everyone's ideal wife. But I was certain she was cheating, and in my eyes, she instantly turned into the ugliest bird in Northampton where we lived. I went to bed almost immediately. I didn't want a confrontation. I felt Christine join me an hour later, but I pretended to be asleep, and she was asleep quickly. However, I laid there tossing and turning, thinking about what to do. It was a good job she was a heavy sleeper. I eventually got to sleep, having formed a plan in my mind. In the morning, I got up early, went to my home office, and started browsing the internet. I wanted a tracking device. I eventually found what I wanted, a GPS device which would keep a log of its journey and times, which could either be replayed or downloaded into a mapping program such as Autoroute, Maptitude, etc. I ordered the device and arranged delivery to a friend's house nearby. Ross knew of my suspicions about Christine. He had caught his wife cheating a few years ago, and gave me the been there done that talk. I went round to see him that evening and told him I was finally doing something about it, as I had a bare-faced lie which needed explaining. He said he would ring me on my mobile when my package arrived. 2 days later, Ross rang me, and I went round to collect my package, wondering how to fit it to her car without her noticing. In the end, the problem solved itself. When she got in from work, she asked me if I would take her car to the garage in the morning for a minor fix and warned me that she would be late home. I was going to a meeting in London the next day and could drop it off on my way to the station, then pick it up on my way home. Brilliant. I fitted the tracker under the rear parcel shelf of my car as she will be driving it. She never went in the boot as it was full of my tools. I went round the block, got back, and hooked the unit up to my laptop. My 10-minute drive appeared highlighted on the Autoroute map. The following day, she arrived home late. Apparently, she had been out with Sam and Linda again. It was too late to do anything about it that night without arousing suspicions, so I went to bed and tried to put it out of my mind. She followed me through the shower and into bed. Once in bed, she initiated sex. Now this was quite unusual. Lately, I always had to make the first move. This was one of my suspicions that had built up over the last 3 months. I wasn't really in the mood, and it must have shown, but after a few minutes, she had her way with me. I was confused, but I was also tired and fell asleep quickly. As soon as I got up the next morning, I went out to retrieve the tracker and plugged it into my laptop. I saw her drive to work, then from work, she went to a road on the other side of town and parked in a cul-de-sac, Preston Gardens, until driving home. I had a look on Google Earth, and there are 6 very large detached houses in their own grounds. Each house appeared to be secluded from its neighbors by carefully planted trees, with views over open country to the rear. These places would fetch a lot of money. I needed a good excuse to check out all the occupants there and decided to revive the business idea I had a year or so ago, to offer a complete home maintenance service to well-off householders, and printed off 8 color brochures. It meant doing some cold calling, but it was the best cover I could think of. I drove across town and parked at the head of the cul-de-sac. My first impressions were confirmed. Every house had 2 or 3 expensive cars parked on the drive, and my Ford Focus looked well out of place. The first house was occupied by an elderly retired couple. They invited me in and were very interested in my idea. We chatted away for maybe 20 minutes, and I think I could have closed the sale there and then. But I wanted to leave it open to come back, so I left my details and went on to the next house. They were a couple in their early 40s. The husband worked from home, much like me, and they had 3 teenage children who were at home. They didn't want my services. The husband was clearly quite comfortable with major DIY projects. I didn't see how he could entertain my wife under the noses of his children, even if his wife was away. There was no one in at the third house, so that was still a possibility. The fourth house was occupied by a very attractive young woman in her mid-20s. Now, I wouldn't mind dallying with her. Her husband was away, so that ruled him out, and anyway, with a wife like that, I couldn't see Christine getting a look in. The fifth house was empty and up for sale. The last one was occupied by a Japanese family. The husband worked at a new development in the town. I had discounted all but the house where there was no reply when a thought struck me. Maybe they had used the house that was up for sale. I decided to pay the agents a visit. I went home, changed into a suit, and rang the agents for an appointment. They said that all viewings had to be accompanied, so if I was on the right track, that limited it to someone who worked for the agents. I went to their office in town and pretended to have arrived by train from London. That way, they would take me to the house and my car wouldn't be seen again. I spent maybe 10 minutes in the office and didn't see anyone that fitted the bill. I had already decided I was looking for a man aged 30 to 60, and both the manager and her assistant were female. Maybe Christine had turned bisexual on me. The house viewing left me no closer to an answer. The house was empty, and there were no signs of a recent visit. The electric was also off, so the place would have been dark last night. I knew that I was missing something, and when I got home, I just sat in my office and played around on my computer. The answer was in Preston Gardens, but I hadn't found it. I also tried to think of any valid reason why Christine would have spent yesterday evening there, but I couldn't. While I was sitting there, an email came in. All it said was, "Getting warm in Preston Gardens." It had to be related to my search, but who had my email address? Then I remembered that it was on the brochures, so someone there knew something. I decided to go back and see the old couple. Maybe they would give something away without even knowing what they knew. As I pulled up outside the house again, my phone beeped with a text, and it said, "Getting colder." I tried to ring the number that sent the text, but no one answered. I got out of the car and decided to have a quick walk round again, just to see if anything struck me. Besides, someone was watching me and playing the old hotter colder game with me. As I walked up, I got another text, "Getting warmer again," so I carried on walking. As I got to the house that was occupied by the 20-something whose hubby was away, I got yet another text, "Getting hot now." As I approached the gates, the front door opened and a lady called me in. This was the start of the blackest hour of my life. Well, maybe not that bad. After all, I was almost certain Christine was cheating from my own inquiries. But even so, this meeting confirmed my worst fears. As I walked up the drive, the woman held out her hand and introduced herself as Amanda and said, "We need to have a talk. Please come in." She went straight to the point and said my wife was having an affair with her husband, and it's been going on for months. My face probably showed pain and hate. To start an affair like she had was a pretty horrid thing to do. She then carried on to explain that she became really suspicious about 6 weeks ago and finally employed a private investigator to follow her husband. She had arrived home late recently from a visit to her mother in France, and the investigators called and gave her the news, together with pictures, times, and places. She showed me the file, and there was no doubt. There was my wife with her husband, along with her name and address. My house calls in the cul-de-sac had confirmed to her that I was on to Christine. Otherwise, it would have been an amazing coincidence. I explained my tracking device and what it had uncovered. She asked me what I was going to do, and I said, throw her out. Amanda then started to tell me a bit about her husband. His father was the owner of a shoe factory, as well as several other business interests and factories, and his son was a junior partner in these enterprises. She wanted revenge, and that it wasn't the first time he has cheated, and she doubted it will be the last. She then asked me about my circumstances, and I explained that we were mortgage-free and fairly well off, 2 incomes, and no kids. She asked me if I wanted to give half to my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife. Needless to say, I answered no. Amanda was going to organize a showdown in front of her father-in-law at the factory where her husband was MD and my wife worked in the accounts department. There was also a stepsister who was involved with the business. She had been sidelined and was pissed off, so she was the way in. What I couldn't understand was why he would cheat on Amanda. She was every bloke's dream girl. Anyway, she went to the kitchen and made a pot of tea, and we talked. She helped me put a plan together to protect my assets and gave me the name of a friendly solicitor, as she thought this would take 2 to 3 weeks. I asked if the affair was likely to fizzle out, and she said no. They got together at least twice a week. Having laid our plans, we parted as comrades in arms, if not friends. Somehow, though she was a very attractive woman, I didn't warm to Amanda as a person, but perhaps that was due to the circumstances of our meeting. Yes, I was gutted and upset, but I think having a plan and a comrade in arms helped me face it. And after all, it wasn't a surprise. I had been making my own inquiries because I knew in my own mind she was cheating. So, having agreed to her plan, I went home. The cheater would be home in an hour or so. The next 2 days passed without incident, and then that evening, Christine announced she was going to be late tomorrow night as she was going out with Sam and Linda. I sent a text to Amanda saying, they are meeting tomorrow night. She replied with, I know, he has just told me that he will be away tomorrow night. Want to have a little fun. Pick me up at 4 p.m. I wasn't sure what she meant, but decided to play along. I picked her up at home and she said, we are off to Travel Lodge Hotel. They always meet there unless I am away, and he stays over. He is supposed to be in London. They will arrive about 6 o'clock, so that gives us time. She didn't say what we would have time for. When we got there, she had a whispered chat with the girl on the reception desk and was handed a passkey to a room in exchange for a £50 note. Once in the room, she took a packet from her handbag and folded the bed back, itching powder. That will give them something to think about. She then put a small camera behind the curtain and said she will recover that in the morning and give me a call. In 5 minutes, we were back at reception, and she asked the girl on reception if she would be on in the morning. She said she would, so Amanda told her not to let anyone else into the room after the guests left. She slipped her another £50. The girl asked if it was her husband, and she said it was, and that my wife was involved. The girl on reception seemed to be on our side. I got home as usual and waited up for Christine. She turned up at 11:15 and said that she was late because she had to take her friend home as she wasn't well. I also noticed she was fidgeting a lot. The itching powder had obviously done its job. She went for a shower and was a long time. She then got into bed, and I was asleep in a few minutes. Amanda rang me the next morning to tell me she had recovered the camera, and it made interesting viewing. I told her I'll look at it the next time we meet. After the positive reaction to the home maintenance package that I got from the older couple in Preston Gardens, I decided that idea was worth pursuing. It had been rolling around in my head for over a year, and it was only the need to visit Preston Gardens that made me dust it off again. That evening, I had the chance to play some mind games with Christine. We were due to visit her mum and dad, who lived just outside Northampton. I told her I need to drop a brochure off on the way out, and I'll only be 5 minutes. I was going to call on the old couple again and try to close the sale. As I pulled into Preston Gardens, I saw her tense up, but when I stopped short of Amanda and James' house, she relaxed slightly. I knocked, was invited in, and in 5 minutes had closed the sale. I left and rejoined her in the car. I asked if she was okay, and she said yes, but her voice gave her away. She didn't calm down until we were well away from Preston Gardens. As we were on our way to the in-laws, the old couple rang to ask if I wanted to pick up the signed agreements on my way back. Of course I did. Christine heard everything as I was on hands-free, and as soon as I hung up, she went ballistic and said she has to be up early, as her boss needs her to prepare some reports before he goes away. This boss is James, Amanda's husband. I thought for a minute and said, "Okay, we can leave a bit earlier, and I'll drop you off at home so that you can get an early night." She was now in a foul mood and picked a fight with her dad as soon as we arrived. This turned into a full-blown row, and her mom Joan and I both retreated into the conservatory. As soon as we had left the room, Joan asked what was up with Christine, if we have had a row. I just said, "It must be the time of the month." Joan then caught me unawares. "She's having a time of the month every week now." "I think there is something wrong. Is there anything you want to tell me?" I said, "No," but Joan wasn't stupid. She knew something was going on. The problem was, I knew her, and she would dig until she got to the bottom of it. She wouldn't like what she found, that her daughter was having an affair, but at this point, she wouldn't know that. We actually left very early. As we left, Joan pushed a piece of paper into my pocket. We drove back towards Northampton in silence. When we got home, she said she was off to bed, and I said, "Okay, I have a few things to sort out, so I'll sleep in the spare room and then I won't disturb you." I sorted out the paperwork for the property maintenance contract with the old couple. I then looked at Joan's note and it says, "Ring me during the day, please. I want to talk to you." The next morning, Christine left early, at just after 7. She would be in the office by 7:30 at the latest. I wondered what they were up to. When I got in at 5, Christine was in the kitchen, cooking, and seemed a lot happier. I asked her why she was home early, and she said she wanted to cook a nice meal to make it up to me. The following evening, Thursday, I arrived at Amanda's at 6:30. We discussed the plans for the following day. Vanessa, James' half-sister, would get Christine and James in the upstairs conference room at 10. Amanda and I would arrive. The receptionist had been told to expect us and send us straight up, and then the show would begin. I had divorce papers for Christine. Amanda had papers for James, and she had copies of all the incriminating photos. I got home at about 9:30 and Christine came in about an hour later. I was in bed and pretended to be asleep even though my mind was working overtime. The next morning, she left for work at the normal time. I hung around and met Amanda outside the shoe factory at 10 minutes to 10. Vanessa met us at reception. She was a good bit younger than James, maybe mid-20s. She was plump and homely looking, not a girl that would turn your head, but I thought she was attractive. She showed us into the conference room where James and Christine were already sitting at the table with some papers in front of them. Christine had her back to the door and didn't see us come in. James called to Amanda, and Christine looked round and saw me. As she did so, I handed her the envelope containing the divorce papers. Amanda handed James a similar brown envelope. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds, and then Christine, with a shocked look on her face, looked up and said, "What's happening? Can't we talk about it?" Amanda answered her, "You have been having an affair with my husband for some months. Good for you." I then chipped in, "James, you were scum in my eyes. I thought about arranging a beating for you, but I'll leave you to your luck." She then passed him a paper, and his response was, "Hard luck, Amanda. You signed a prenuptial agreement." His father then entered the room and asked what the heck was going on. After a brief silence, Vanessa answered that it seems James has been having an affair with my wife, and Amanda and I were in the process of confronting them. I then spoke to Christine and told her she will leave the house, and I'm having the locks changed as we speak, that she can fight me for a settlement, in which case the evidence, which I held out towards her, will be passed on to all her family, mum, dad, and sisters. I then suggested she can have a specific amount of money and get out of my life. James' father then looked at his son and said, "Amanda is intelligent and a good wife, and you have to go and ruin it with someone else's wife." James just sat there and pushed the piece of paper in front of his dad, who blanched when he saw it. Vanessa turned to me and Amanda and asked us to leave. We left. We had done what we came for. As we left the room, I could already hear Christine and James shouting and blaming each other. As we walked out of the factory, past the reception desk, Vanessa said to both of us, in a voice that everyone there could hear, "Perhaps Father will realize that my brother is a waste of space and take me seriously now." We left together, but didn't acknowledge each other beyond a brief, "I will call you," from Amanda as we left. I just nodded. We didn't want the tongues wagging. I went home and let myself in. I sat down and cried. I was actually heartbroken by Christine's behavior. I had loved her, and I think it hit me then. I sat in a chair, the TV on, but not really watching it, in a world of my own when my mobile rung. It was Joan. I let it ring, but it didn't stop, and in the end, I answered it. Joan went straight off into a long speech about how Christine had wrung her in a state, because she had had a fling, but it didn't mean anything. I stopped her mid-flow and explained that Christine has been having an affair behind my back for at least 3 months, maybe longer. She has been seeing her partner in crime, who is her boss, at least twice a week, in addition to whatever they got up to in company time. I told her I was divorcing her, and if she tries to get more than a minimal settlement from me, I'll make her life miserable, and I'll let everyone know what a person she has been, and I have the pictures to back it up. And so, while she may get more money, it may not be worth it. Joan started crying, and between sobs, she said she knew something was wrong, and she thought I was the one having the affair. In the end, she pulled herself together and said, "I am sorry, Tony. We really like you, and you've been a good husband. I think Christine has made a big mistake." I agreed and brought the conversation to an end. I really wasn't in the mood. I decided I needed to do something to take my mind off things and got my old bike out. I would have a ride on the country roads as it was a fine afternoon. I must have been out 2 hours at least, and when I got back, Christine was waiting on the doorstep. Her eyes were red, and she had obviously been crying. As I rode up our drive, she ran towards me saying, "Tony, I am sorry. Can we talk, please?" I ignored her and went to put my bike away in the garage. She followed and said again, "I am sorry. I don't love James. It was just a fling." The way she was coming out with the old cliches that people use when an affair is exposed just made me angrier. She tried a different tack and said, "At least talk to me. You owe me that." I went and opened the front door, and she stood on the step. I let myself in, and she obviously expected to follow me, but I turned and blocked her, facing her. I then very quietly told her I have a recording made at the Travel Lodge where she and James declared their love for each other. So I don't believe her when she says it was just a fling, and I owe her nothing. I told her she decided to try and trade me in, and now it looks like it's going pear-shaped, and she wants to get back with me, and I have only one thing to say: no deal. She started to cry and said, "What do I have to do to convince you I am sorry?" I just looked at her, she was actually pissing me off now, and said, "I don't doubt you are sorry. Sorry you got busted. Sorry James doesn't want to play now he's been busted. My problem is one of trust, even assuming I could overcome my disgust at your behavior. How would I ever trust you again? Every time you were late in from work, I would wonder, even if it was perfectly innocent, a traffic jam or something. And if you wanted to go to a work stew or meet your colleagues after work, same problem. I don't see how we could live like that." She was now sobbing hard, and between sobs said, "I know. Well, the first thing, I will give you your divorce on your terms. I want to prove to you that I am sorry, that I've learned my lesson, and can be trusted. I can't do that while we are fighting a bitter battle through the courts." I looked at her and just muttered, "Fine." She then asked if she could come in and collect some clothes. I decided to follow up on what she had just said and replied, "You can take some clothes now. Find a solicitor tomorrow. Accept my terms. Then we can decide what other things are yours and you can arrange to get them moved." She had now pulled herself together again and said, "I've already had an initial talk with a solicitor and instructed him to accept your terms, even though he advised me that I could get considerably more. I explained why I was accepting your offer and told him to proceed on my behalf." I then let her in and she went upstairs to our room. At first, I was going to follow her, but then decided that I would see what she came down with and waited in the living room. About 15 minutes later, she came down with a large suitcase and I showed her out. She said she'll be staying at her mom and dad's for the moment, and I just said, "Okay." After she had gone, I rang my brother in British Columbia and got him out of bed. It was only 6:30 a.m. there, and I explained the situation. He asked me if I wanted to visit them in Canada for a couple of weeks. I agreed straight away. I could leave my solicitor to deal with things this end, and it would give me a break. By 4:30, I had flights booked. I was flying out on Monday and would be gone for 2 weeks and a day, returning Tuesday evening. That evening, Amanda rang, and we compared notes. James, as expected, was trying every trick in the book to stop Amanda filing for divorce on the grounds of his adultery. She asked when I was coming around to see her, and I told her quite truthfully that I was going away for 2 weeks or so, and give things a chance to settle down. She sounded very upset and said, "Are we finished?" I decided that truth was the best option and said, "I think you are beautiful, intelligent, and attractive, and any man who you fell in love with would be the luckiest man in the world. But with all the stress of the last few weeks, I think we both need a bit of space to think about the future." She was silent for a few seconds and then said, "Tony, I know it's early days, and we haven't met under ideal circumstances, but I am falling in love with you, and yes, there is lust as well." I didn't know what to say to this, and it was my turn to be silent. She asked if I was still there, and I snapped out of my thoughts and said, "Yes, I'll fly back into Heathrow Tuesday fortnight from Vancouver, and if she still felt the same way about things in 2 weeks, she should meet me at the airport." She cheered up a bit and promised she will be there, but asked what she'll get in return. So I asked what she wanted, and her response was immediate: to see if we can make a go of things as a couple. Either we start going out or move in together. I still wasn't sure, but I was attracted to Amanda at sexual level. I just wondered if she was out of my league, and at that moment, 2 weeks seemed a long way off. Over the weekend, I packed and got myself ready to visit Neil. I rang Joan in the end and told her I would be away for 2 weeks. Does Christine want any more clothes, etc.? Joan and Christine came around about half an hour later, and Christine was quiet. As they were leaving, Christine said, "When you get back, think about what I would need to do to get you back." I didn't want another discussion on this, particularly in front of Joan, and I said, "I'm having 2 weeks away to get my head together. Now is not a good time to discuss it." She just said, "Okay, I can wait." I flew out Monday, and meeting Neil, his wife, Cindy, and their 3 kids took my mind off things. They lived in a beautiful house overlooking a wooded valley. We went for walks on the woodland trails, and I took his oldest lad mountain biking on some of the trails in the area. I rang my solicitor at the end of the first week and he had already gotten confirmation from Christine's solicitor that the terms outlined would be acceptable, and the required documents were being drawn up. The 2 weeks disappeared all too quickly, and on the Monday evening, I found myself on the flight back to Heathrow. I wondered if Amanda would be there to meet me, as I still wasn't sure what her motives were. We landed on time, and jet-lagged and tired, I made my way to the baggage claim, and then through customs and immigration. As I left the immigration desk, I could see Amanda standing at the barrier, waving. I walked towards her, and I was glad she was there. What bloke wouldn't be? And she had had time to reflect on events and still wanted to be around me. I have to be honest, that did a lot for my pride. We got back to my house at 11 p.m. She stayed the night with me. When I woke up the next morning, after an undisturbed night's sleep, I was served tea and toast. It was 7 o'clock. We sat in bed, and I asked her how James was reacting to her demands. She told me that his solicitors had advised him to settle with her, and she had been offered a lump sum payment. I asked about the house in Preston Garden, and she said that was included as well. She asked me what I thought, and I said that it sounded like a lot of money to me, and a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Over the next few weeks, we alternated between mine and Amanda's house, and I had to admit it was difficult. The things we both needed always seemed to be at the other house. The two divorces were progressing. Amanda had agreed to the offer from James, and I had written confirmation that Christine was going to accept my offer. I set about raising a small mortgage on my house to pay her, as I didn't want to empty my savings out. Amanda kept hinting at me moving into her place permanently, and on the Friday when I got in, she showed me one of the spare rooms. It was now fitted out as an office, so there is no excuse now. I can move my stuff over the weekend. I hired a van on the Saturday morning, and by tea time, I had most of the things I needed. So, on Monday, I went to the estate agent and put the wheels in motion to let my house out. I was pleasantly surprised at the rental income that I would obtain. Apparently, there was a shortage of family-sized places at the moment. A couple of weeks went by, and yes, the sex was mind-blowing, but Amanda seemed to do nothing other than wait at home for me to get in from work, and to be honest, I felt smothered. Christine had tried to ring a few times. She now knew that Amanda and I were an item. But Amanda answered each time and told her that I wouldn't speak to her, which was a lie. Then, one morning, whilst sitting in an interminable meeting with a customer, a thought jumped into my head. Amanda hadn't been on the rag since we had been intimate, and that it was 5 weeks since I got back from Canada. Was she pregnant, or did she suffer from women's problems? She hadn't said anything, but I made up my mind to ask her later. I got home about 5, and Amanda, as always, had a nice meal on the go. We sat down and I asked her if she was okay. She said yes. I decided to tackle it head on and said, "It's just that there's been no sign of any monthlies, and it's over 5 weeks since I got back from Canada." For once, she was silent. I looked at her and waited for a reply. After what seemed like an age, she said quietly, "I'm late. I think I may be pregnant." Now, it was my turn to be quiet. She looked at me and said, "Say something." I laughed quietly and said, "I suppose we have been going at it like rabbits. Aren't you on the pill?" She said no, that she had implants. I knew nothing about implants, but I thought that a visit to her gynecologist was a good idea and said, "Shouldn't you see your gynecologist or get a pregnancy test?" That evening, I thought the atmosphere was tense, and I asked her if being pregnant worried her. She just said it didn't, but I could see she was tense. I tried to calm her down by saying I still love her even if she was pregnant. I had never mentioned the love word before. I think we were in lust, not love, but I wanted to make her feel better. In bed that night, the sex was much more tender. We made love, and I began to think that maybe being pregnant was good for us. I had a meeting in London the next morning, and she promised me she would go to the doctor's in the morning. At lunchtime, I rang her, and she seemed excited. She said she was pregnant, that the implants have failed for some reason and the doctor has removed them. I didn't ask how far gone she was. I assumed about 4 weeks. Over the next few days, she seemed to relax a bit, and I even got her to come out with me for a meal on Friday night. Everything seemed fair. Even Christine had given up trying to contact me. Saturday morning, we went shopping as usual, and everything was fine until we got to the checkout. She seemed to go pale, and before I knew it, she had collapsed on the floor. The store help desk called an ambulance, and it wasn't long before we were on the way to the hospital. She had come round after a few minutes, but in spite of her protests that she was okay, I thought she should get checked out. When we got there, the nurse checked her over and took a small blood sample. In a few minutes, she came back with a Mars bar and a smile. "Ma'am, you're fine, but your blood sugar is very low. Eat this and take it easy for a few hours. It often happens around the 12th week of pregnancy." As I looked at her, I could now see a slight swell to her belly. 12 weeks. That was 3 weeks before we even met for the first time. I just looked at her and she started to cry. I left the hospital and called a cab. I couldn't face another lying, cheating woman. Common sense also stepped in, and I got the taxi to take me to the agents who were handling the letting of my house. Fortunately, I was able to withdraw it from the market, though a couple were ready to sign up for a 6-month lease the following week. I told the agents that I would cover their out-of-pocket expenses and compensate them. The agents thought that this was reasonable. I also had their fees to settle as well. So, by lunchtime, I was back in my old house and feeling very sorry for myself. Amanda kept trying to ring my phone. She must have rung 30 times or more in the space of 2 hours and sent so many texts. They filled the memory on my phone. I didn't read them. In the end, I decided the answer lay at the bottom of a whiskey bottle and proceeded to empty it in order to look more closely at it. By 3 o'clock, all my problems had faded away and I was passed out in the chair. It must have been 2 or 3 hours later when I came round to a banging on the front door. It was Vanessa, James' half-sister. She banged on the window again and beckoned for me to let her in, that she needs to speak to me. I got up, made my way to the front door, opened it, and she walked in. She looked at me and said, "Okay, I want your side of the story. Amanda is at my house and claims you abandoned her at the hospital." She was nearly hysterical, but she also mentioned being pregnant. So I told my story, starting a few days ago, when I noticed that Amanda hadn't had a period for 5 weeks. I finished by telling her that, at the hospital, the nurse looked at her notes and said, 12th week of pregnancy. I also pointed out that I was in the process of divorcing one lying, cheating woman and had no desire to get attached to another one. When I had finished, Vanessa was silent for a few seconds. She then said she'll go and have another chat with Amanda, that she hasn't actually told her any lies, but she has left out some very important details. She got up to leave and said she'll come back later. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is someone at the door again, but now it was dark. It was Vanessa carrying 2 pizza boxes and a bottle of pop. I put the light on and she bustled in. She said she's had a discussion with Amanda and it appears that she hasn't used contraceptives since, and she admits to having a brief fling in France while she was visiting her mother. I said, well, it won't do her any good coming crawling round here. She has her house and I'll be getting removal men to move my things back here as soon as possible. I can't cope with another lying woman. Vanessa then left and I sat for about half an hour, just blankly looking into space. I suppose, deep down, I always felt the relationship with Amanda was a bit strange. Yes, the sex was good, but in other ways, she seemed well, distant, and now I knew why. My mobile then rang again, but I remember I had set Amanda's number to not ring, so I picked it up. It was my brother in Canada. He usually rang every other week on a Saturday. We used to take it in turns each week. "Hi, Tony. How are you doing?" he asked, as cheerful as ever. My "not too good" reply and the tone of my voice obviously gave my mood away. By now, I had 100 little men hammering inside my head, and I felt awful. He said he tried to ring me at home, but no one answered. I then ended up telling him the whole sorry story. When I finished, he said, "Bro, you really are out of luck with women at the moment." We chatted away for a bit, and he said I could come out again if I want. I said if I came out to Canada every time a relationship broke down, I might just as well emigrate. He then set me thinking. Well, you could do a lot more. There are some good jobs going in the mines, and I know it doesn't bother you. If I remember rightly, it was Christine who wouldn't move to the country. We ended our conversation, and I went to bed that night feeling drained and hungover. When I awoke on Sunday morning, Amanda had rung loads of times and sent me at least a dozen texts. I deleted the texts, but realized I would have to speak to her. As if nothing else, I needed to get my stuff back. I decided to bite the bullet and get it over with and dialed her number. She answered immediately and said she was sorry. She should have told me, but it's not like she cheated on me. I decided it was best not to get into a row and just said I am moving out. I don't think it will work. It's a trust thing. That she would have let me go on thinking the baby was mine, and no doubt claimed it was premature when she gave birth early. I told her I was getting a man with a van to collect my things in the morning, and I'm moving back to my house for now. She continued to say how sorry she was. The problem was, I had heard the same story from another woman about 6 weeks ago and was in no mood to listen. I went to a small cafe and ordered a full English breakfast, and while I was eating it, I thought about what Neil had said the night before, about working in the mines. If he was right about the salaries on offer, and the fact that they would assist with the immigration process, it might be worth doing, even if only for a couple of years. To be honest, I was fed up with my life. I got home about 10 and decided that I would go out on my bike and then have a look on the internet at the opportunities that my brother had spoken about. I rode for about an hour and worked some of my frustration out on the pedals. When I got back, I had a look at the link my brother had sent. The mining companies were certainly offering some good deals, and I filled in the online application. I wasn't sure if I would hear any more, but it was worth a try. I spent the rest of the day pottering around at home. I did some shopping and started to get used to the idea of being on my own. I had an early night and slept well, but woke early. By the time I had made some tea and breakfast, it was 8 o'clock, and I rang some of the man with a van ads in the yellow pages. Half an hour later, I had a man and van organized and rang Amanda to tell her I would be over at about 10 to pick my stuff up. Yet again, she told me how sorry she was for lying to me. I told her to change the record. I was sick of hearing it, and hung up. I had already warned my van man that she may kick off. He said he was used to it, that he'll get my things and go. We arrived at Amanda's place dead on 10, and she came out to meet us. I have to admit, she was a fine-looking woman, but she was a liar. She also behaved herself. No kickoffs or begging. She offered us all a cup of tea. When we were out at the van with some of my stuff, the other removal man said, "I can't believe you're walking out on that. She's page 3 material." I told him about the lies, but he just said, "Yeah, maybe, but she is one sexy woman." When we had loaded the last of my stuff, she came up to me and said she was sorry, that I shouldn't hate her. With that, she pulled away and turned back towards the house. By 2 o'clock, all my stuff was back at my house and I sat down. I was tempted to reach for the whiskey bottle again, but the memories of Saturday's hangover were still fresh in my mind, so I didn't. I must have been sitting there for at least an hour or more just thinking about the events of the past few months. I decided that going out to see my brother for another holiday would just mean that I would still have to face things when I got back. But if I could get a long-term contract in Canada or even emigrate permanently, I would go for it. After all, I had nothing to keep me in the UK. Both my parents were dead and my nearest relative lived in Canada. I finally broke myself out of my funk at about 4 and decided I needed to do something. In the end, I made a meal and got changed. I would go up to the pub where the cricket team drank. The season was over, but there should be a few of my mates in. I also decided I wasn't drinking. I just need to see a friendly face. I got there around 8 and 2 of the lads were in. We actually had a good evening. We played pool, darts, and put the world to rights, and I drove home, stone cold sober at 11:30. When I got in, I went straight to bed. The following morning, I got stuck back into my work as I had 5 days work to do in 4, so the week passed fairly quickly. I got used to sleeping on my own. I was dreading the weekend, so when I got an email from a company asking me to do some urgent electrical refurbishment work over the next few weekends, I accepted. During the following week, I was checking my email and found a reply to my application, thanking me for my application and asking me to attend an interview in London in 3 weeks. There was also a little questionnaire to fill in. They wanted to know if the move was permanent or temporary, if my partner was joining me, etc. I filled it all in and accepted their invitation to an interview in 3 weeks. In spite of working 7 days a week, I was now missing sex badly and decided to go out on the prowl on Friday evening to see if I could pick a woman up. I had wondered about trying to meet a woman through the internet, but I wasn't sure if it would work. I got dressed up on Friday night and hit the pubs in town. In the third bar, a rather large girl, Chanel, perhaps 22, latched onto me, and I decided she would do as Miss Right Now. So I had my first one-night stand in 12 years or more. The next few weeks flew by. Chanel and I met up each Friday, and I began to get a bit concerned about her. I think she wanted a more permanent relationship. I was honest with her right from the first night, but I guess she hoped that she could win me over. She was almost half my age, but it didn't seem to worry her. She kept on talking about how men her own age were immature and dropping little hints. The day of the interview came around and I set off for London. The interview was quite exhaustive. They told me that offers would be made based upon the one interview. I noticed a number of people left straight after lunch. They hadn't made the grade. I wasn't sent home, and at 4 in the afternoon, I was taken back into the interview room and told that the job of chief electrical engineer was on offer, providing I passed a few more hurdles, a security check, medical, etc. They were prepared to fly me out for a week to look at the site and make a final decision. They offered me either a 2-year contract or a permanent position with an emigration package thrown in. I accepted their offer for the visit and asked if I needed to return to the UK if I accepted a position, explaining that my brother lived about 150 miles to the south. I finally left London on the 7 o'clock train. Chanel rang while I was on the way back and insisted on meeting me at the station. When I got into Northampton, she was on the platform, and as I got off, she gave me a hug as if I had been gone a month. She asked me how it had gone, and when I told her, her face fell, and she asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind, but I told her there wasn't. We had a goodbye sex that night in between the tears. I really liked her, and I asked if she would join me, but she said she has ties here, her parents, brothers, sisters, and she couldn't just up and go. The time for my departure drew nearer. It was now the night before, and I realized that there would be no one to take me to the airport. So I booked a taxi, set the alarm, and turned in for what would hopefully be my last night in the UK for a very long time. I turned my phone off. Christine had now got wind of my impending departure and was trying to ring every day. James' solicitor had also rung, asking lots of questions. I refused to answer even the most basic ones and told him to sling his hook. He then said he could issue a subpoena to force me to attend court and give evidence. My reply was, maybe, but I'll be 3,500 miles away by next week, and I ended the conversation. It was obvious that James was now aware of the situation, or at least had his suspicions. Problem was, Amanda was a liar, but James was far worse in my eyes, and I had no intention of helping him in any way. I hate lawyers, but in this case, I actually hoped that they litigated away all James' fortune. Amanda still tried ringing, and Chanel had rung twice over the weekend. Her call was the hardest to take as she had done nothing wrong, just got caught up in my need for a change of scene. And so, I went to bed. The taxi was due at 5 the next morning. I fell into a troubled sleep about midnight. My mind was working overtime, which was hardly surprising given the circumstances, and when the alarm woke me at 4 o'clock, I felt like shit. However, everything was ready, so I didn't need to worry about forgetting anything. In spite of that, I checked my travel pouch with my passport and documents about 5 times before the taxi arrived. I dozed again in the back of the cab, and when I arrived at Heathrow, I felt partly human. I found the check-in desk and began the long, boring waits that are part of any long-haul flight. Eventually, we boarded, and I found my seat. In 7 hours or so, I would be on the other side of the Atlantic. I arrived Canada and quickly settled in. I was free and finally ready to start afresh. I kept in contact with Chanel for a while until I was fully preoccupied with my new life. My divorce went smoothly with Christine, and that of Amanda was settled as well. I plan to get married, but I'm taking my time at the moment. Did I regret my actions? No, but I sure didn't just stay there and do nothing about my situation. I'm careful to not lose my guard anymore, and I hope for the best. Thank you for watching. Share and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Take care.